Okay, so for this, I'm going to start by, I want to start by saying what I think about the poem and what I think the poem is in general about. And so I think that the poem is about trying to escape from a situation almost, like trying to get away from something that you don't want to be around, and the different ways that you can escape something like that. And yeah, I'll go more into that as I analyze the poem and the different ways that the poem goes about doing that. But first, I want to say about how, like, general things that the poem talks about, or general, like, themes, or not themes, general continuous literary devices or literary techniques that are used throughout the poem. And so I'm going to start with that throughout the poem there is a sense of using the conditional tense of the poem, and that is like phrases like I could grow or I could do something, and that is used throughout the poem. Although the word could is not used throughout the poem, it is implied throughout the poem because the infinitive of the word is used throughout the poem, which is just a continuation of the original sentence that a conditional tense is used in. And so I think that the conditional tense is very important in interpreting this poem because it is saying that nothing is happening yet. Like, the speaker of the poem is in the present, and they are saying like hypothetical things that they could do to change the situation that they're in. And obviously there is a want for a change because the speaker clearly states in the first couple lines in the poem, specifically line 1 and line 3, I can change myself, and I can change again, although in that sense is more negative because she's saying I can't change you. And I'm going to use she to refer to the speaker because in the title of the poem it says she considers evading him, and she is relating to the I of the poem because obviously she is saying I could do something, so she is obviously considering the future or considering, like, possible actions, and that is according to the poem, the title, the considering. And him, I think, is related to the pronoun you throughout the poem because she's saying she considers evading him, and then she goes through like I can change you or less than I can change you, and throughout the poem just kind of refers to as she's wanting to avoid him or wanting to change something about herself to get away from the him of the poem. And obviously the pronouns used in the poem itself are I and you, and I think actually this is in a way supposed to make it more of a personal thing. Like, often it's hard for people to consider other people's struggles and actually empathize with them. So by using I and you, it's making it a little bit more personal for the reader, in saying like this is a challenge that I face or something like that. And so that is used throughout the entire poem. It's always the same pronouns and it's always the same conditional tense, except for obviously the first stanza where it's saying present tense, where she's saying I can change. And I think obviously this relates a bit back to my argument that the poem is about trying to escape something, because this is being more apparent in the rest of the poem, going through the different stanzas. But it's kind of like saying I want to change something to get out of the situation that I am in right now. And she's saying like I want to change myself because she's saying it's hard to change other people and it's much more easy to change one's own person. And so the second thing that is very obvious in this poem is that the speaker is talking about what action she wants to take in the future. But anyway, going through the stanzas is kind of like telling a story almost. The second stanza where she says I could grow bark and become a shrub, that is in the present, and one is obviously it's in present because the rest of the poem, which is going through the different stages, like the third stanza is about the past, the fourth stanza is about the future, and the fifth stanza is about death. it's obviously it's about the present because she talks about growing bark and being a shrub, and I think the important word here is shrub for one thing, because a shrub is a moving thing. It just kind of grows where it is, and it moves through time, but it never really moves anywhere else. So it's kind of like saying that the speaker is going to stay where she is, and she's not going to move on from anything. And then also, I think the another important word is she says, "I could grow bark," and I think bark, well, obviously for any kind of plant, bark is kind of like a shell around the inside of the plant. And so I think what she's trying to say here is like, I'm gonna become a harder person. I'm gonna become like grow a shell around herself to protect herself against the rest of the world, which is kind of like saying, instead of avoiding the situation, which is kind of she's trying to go throughout the poem is how she can change the situation. She's saying, instead, I'm going to deal with it almost, and just kind of do what I can right here. And this is the shortest stanza in the entire poem, except for the last stanza, the sixth stanza, which is kind of an ending to the poem. And I think this is the shortest one because she's actually saying this is the least favorable of all of them. Like, she doesn't want to deal with this one, and she's saying, I could do this, but it's kind of unfavorable. So she sounds like calling herself a shrub is like calling herself not a person anymore. So it's almost like becoming subhuman or inhuman by becoming this plant. And in the second part of the poem, she's talking about the past. She says, I could switch back in time to the woman image left in the cave level. And this is obviously the past, and I think there's diction throughout this entire poem, throughout this entire stanza, that kind of reflects abandonment, or the theme of abandonment, and also being worthless and worth nothing almost. And this is saying by abandonment is saying the image left in the cave bubble, and that kind of seems like something left her there, or abandoned her there, which I think is very interesting, because it's like, it kind of brings up questions like, who did that, or what is that about? And it also doesn't specifically say, like, you left the image there, or you left me there, so you don't even know if it's the hymn of the poem that she's currently trying to escape around. And also, I think a very interesting line is when she says, Queen of the Termites, and I think she's referring to herself in that, because I think the woman in the image and everything else in that stanza is always referring back to her. And so I think the Queen of the Termites is a very interesting line, because it seems quite odd to call yourself the Queen of the Termites, like you're queen of nothing, and queen of something that no one likes and it's not worth anything, but still like a queen, like you're still doing something and you're still there for a purpose, but still not completely worth anything. And then the fourth stanza is about the future a little bit more, which is he's saying, speed myself up and disguise myself. And I think what is interesting about the stanza is also the diction, which is indicative of the speaker wanting to hide, which is evident in the words like disguise and the veils of old age. And she's kind of like saying she wants to hide in the future and in that realm of old age, and kind of hiding from the past or hiding from a situation, as when you're old it's kind of harder to move around and do things, and you're kind of just there and waiting for something else to happen. And I think that that is her opinion on this part of it. And then the last part of the poem is about her death, and then she's saying, she starts about a heart attack. She said, I would clutch my heart and collapse on your bed. And I think that is interesting, that she's up one push further, as in like, I could go this far, but obviously death is kind of like an inevitable thing, so it seems weird that she's saying I could do this, and not I will do this. And obviously that's more, something else. And then throughout the poem there's also use of punctuation, like in the first part of the poem, there's almost no punctuation, really. And then in the first part of the poem being the first two stanzas, and the second part of the poem, there's a use of commas, which is kind of like, commas are something you'd use for a list of things or something that happened in the past. Like, it's a continual thing, you know what happened, and it's continual in the past, so you already know the course of events or what's going to happen. And when she talks about the future, she uses parentheses, which I think is interesting, because parentheses are usually for something additional or something that could happen, so it's being like unsure of the future in a way. And then in the fifth stanza as well, there's a colon, which is kind of something that I think of as preceding an end. Like, you would use the colon in like the middle of a sentence, or just start saying that this is the end of the poem, or this is the second half of this idea, and it kind of signifies that there's an end to come. And then the final poem is the only place in the poem where there is a period used, which kind of brings to the final whole end of the poem. And I think that it shows that because every line in this poem is part of one large sentence, which constructs the entire poem in itself, it kind of shows that her life is like one continuous thing moving on, and it doesn't really end until that final death. And it's kind of seeming like she's trying to, and it's kind of indicative of there being some sort of life here, which I think is indicative of, again, that this is something that's a problem in her life or a struggle in her life that she's trying to evade.